right, everybody, we are back with another Ramp Careers Daily Update. Today, I'm here with Mitch, my esteemed co-founder. Mitch, how you doing?
Good, Danny. Good. We're going through a heat wave here in San Francisco. So if you see me sweating during this, it's not because I'm nervous. It's just because I don't have air conditioning.
Oh no, man! Those heat waves in SF are brutal. There's no AC in that entire area. It's crazy.
You only need it for like 3 weeks out of the year, but those 3 weeks are pretty brutal without it.
Yeah. So today we want to continue our discussion on removing friction from the sales process entirely. And I know we want to touch on qualification and discovery for this one. Mitch, we were talking before this. We're both actually very passionate about qualification or disqualification in the discovery process. What are some ways that you've seen qualification add friction to the sales process, and how do you remove those?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Let's start with an example, I think, or maybe we'll just frame up the conversation for everyone. Let's assume that, hey, whether outbound or inbound, we've got somebody on the phone, we've got them on the hook for a quote unquote discovery call, and we maybe have 30 minutes set up to learn a little bit more about them. And we're going to that discovery and qualification call. Typically, I think, at most companies, this is handled by the SDR, by the BDR. Sometimes it'll be the AE, or maybe the AE is on the call as well. But it's kind of like that first line of defense. We're trying to figure out, is this company a fit for us? And then if so, how can we help them? Maybe you're starting to get ideas of pricing and what you might charge them, et cetera, et cetera. I ran into a really interesting example of this just the other day. We talked about it on the last call, but to recap, I was moving out of my apartment, needed some movers, sent out 3 requests for proposals. 3 different companies came back to me with wildly varying qualification calls, if you will. The first one was straightforward. They asked me 2 questions. Where are they going to pick up from and where are they going to drop off? That was it. Super simple for me to shoot them back an email with my locations. Second person came back with like 4 or 5 locations, asking me to like kind of detail out the stuff I was going to be moving, estimating how much stuff I had, which wasn't terrible. And the third one came back with like 25 questions. Things like, do you have an elevator? Is there stairs that we're going to be walking up? Detail everything in your apartment that you've ever owned. Just crazy, crazy amounts of questions for me to answer. And that really got me thinking about this qualification process, how on the seller side, on the salesperson side, you do want to make sure that you're qualifying. We've talked about this before. I know we're both passionate about it. We don't want to let prospects through the funnel that A, aren't a good fit for us, B, can't afford what we have, C, aren't going to buy in a reasonable time. That's going to hurt us as salespeople. But you need to balance that qualification with the prospect's needs, which are they need answers. They need answers quickly, and they don't want to feel like they're being interrogated on the spot when you're on this discovery call. And I really felt that with some of these, even these moving companies asking me these questions. It's just hard, it's time consuming for me to give them all this information, especially compared to the alternative, which is I've got this other company that's giving me 2 questions I need to answer. And I think that's important to consider as salespeople is balancing that discovery qualification with the actual information that we need to gather as a sales rep. What are your thoughts, Danny? Maybe we can go into some tactics here in a second, but you've probably seen this a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And I think qualification is critically important to the sales process. We've talked about this in an earlier episode. It really is the filter that determines whether you're a real deal, a real opportunity to focus on, or you're just a cold lead or a regular lead in your sales process. Now, in terms of the way to do it and the way you should be performing qualification without adding that friction, I like to use a 1-to-1 ratio of hyping up the product or getting your prospect exciting or even rapport building to qualification questions. So it doesn't feel like an interrogation. Also, at the beginning, when you're having those initial conversations, it's okay to keep it somewhat high level and build excitement and see if your prospect is actually interested in even continuing in the sales process. Obviously, your job is to sell and to hype up the product and build value and educate. But it's also to make sure that you're appropriately screening and not over screening that prospect. And the way that you can do this is create a simple 2-column matrix. In column A, you write the question, the qualification question, as bluntly as you can put it, something you probably would never say on a call, the sales robot way. And then in column B, you write how you would communicate that as a human if you were talking to a human. So an example here, instead of asking, what is your budget? you could say something like, so in previous engagements with our customers, typically at this point, our customers have allocated approximately 15K throughout the year. Now, our customers like customer A and customer B have all done that. Is that in line with what you were expecting for an initiative like this? So it just kind of softens it up and it makes it not as blunt like you're asking for that budget question. And then the next thing out of your mouth should be pumping the product, building rapport, engaging the prospect in a non-inquisition like way.
Exactly. I think that's the key, right? Keep it conversational. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to ask you 20 questions all at once. There's a lot of questions that you can gather later in the call as you're building that rapport, as you're pumping up the product, so that it seems a little bit more natural. And there's some questions that you really don't need to ask on that first call, right? You can gather those later once the prospect's more bought into the process. I go to, whenever I do discovery, is I kick the call off with a nice agenda, and then I let them know right up front, hey, look, would love to, I'm really excited to show you our product, our platform, really excited to talk more about what we offer. But before we can do that, it'd be great for me to understand a little bit more about your current situation, what you're going through today, what you're looking for, whatever. The best way for us to do that is to spend 5 or 10 minutes up front so that we can tailor the rest of these conversations. And I found that like 99.99% of people are going to be totally fine with telling you and giving you some information up front, as long as you respect their time and you actually use that information to better tailor your talk track down the road. They rather that than you just spilling off product information with no real purpose behind it. So you can do that, but then like Danny said, make those questions conversational. It's best if you can build off of each question and lead right into, okay, great, Mr. Prospect, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, I understand what you're looking for. And then this is how we're going to help you. This is how my product, my service helps you with that. I think that's the best sales reps I see. Keep it free flowing in that way.
Yeah, so those are all really good points, Mitch. One question that comes to mind is, have you seen qualification processes that have added a ton of friction to the sales process? And if so, what did they do incorrectly that you can easily remedy for folks out there?
Yeah, I think the qualifications that, in my mind, the qualification process that adds a lot of the friction is when an SDR, BDR, even an AE shows up, they are reading questions off of a spreadsheet their marketing team handed them, or sorry, not to throw marketing on the bus, but somebody internally handed them to qualify prospects. And they're just going to read down, okay, what technologies are you using today? How long does that take you? Tell me more about that. And you can just tell it's like this really robotic process where the prospect isn't engaged at all. They are completely like numb to the experience. They're just answering these questions because the SDR is asking them. And then when they do try to go into the actual pitch, it's like they're completely shut down. Like they've tuned out already. So I try to keep my qualification questions and time period to like the first 5 to 10 minutes of a call. That's really all you need to get baselines down. The best qualification questions I've used in the past are kind of abstracted to where the prospect doesn't even know that you're qualifying them, right? Let's say that you need companies that are, let's just say 500 employees, they're doing, 50 million in revenue at a minimum, and they use Salesforce as their CRM. Some of that you can find out pre-call, right? That's list building 101. You can look up the LinkedIn profiles of these companies, figure out how many employees they have. You can guess revenues pretty easily. So maybe all you need to qualify is CRM. Hey, Mrs. Prospect, what CRM are you using today? And then you can build that into some discovery, right? How is Salesforce working for you? What type of integrations do you have off of Salesforce? But once you've got enough, I like to think about like, what's the bare minimum? What's the viable minimum amount of qualification you can do to go into your pitch? Once you've got enough, you need to give to the prospect. You need to give them some information about what you actually do. That's what they're here to hear. They already know their stuff. They want to know what you do as a company. So then I like to start giving information, but then you can always bake in you can bake in qualification to the actual pitch, to the demo. I love doing that because now that you're giving information, you can quickly turn out on the prospect. Hey, Danny, you mentioned earlier that you also are using HubSpot as a marketing tool. Tell me, how is that working with Salesforce today? And now that you're into this rapport building demo situation, they're going to be much more open, I find, to start to give you more and more information. But it's always that give take. What have you seen work well and not work well?
Cool. So I think this is a great place to wrap. Mitch, that was super knowledgeable and informative. So 3 high-level points before we call it. So the first is, when you're running this qualification, disqualification, discovery phase, to eliminate the friction in your sales process, number 1, make sure that you have your qualifications prepared and humanized before you actually sit down for the call. Number 2, Make sure for every question that you want to ask, you also prepare something of value and prepare something potentially of rapport building with your prospects. So have a one-to-one give-get ratio. And number 3, make sure all of your questions, all of your talk tracks are humanized, because the person on the other side of the call is exactly that. They're a person and they're human. They're not a sales robot. So I think that's a good place to wrap for today. For Mitch, this has been Danny with another Ramp Careers Daily Update. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.